Welcome to the University of the Ozarks Podcast. I'm your host, Nate, and today I'm joined by Dr. Christie Sampson, biology professor, and biology student Mackenzie Meier. Well, hello to both of you. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well. And Dr.
Doing
Sampson?
well. Very happy to be here.
Good. I'm glad you're happy to be here.
Always happy.
Always happy.
Well, 95% of the time.
That's a solid percentage, honestly.
It's a good percentage.
So, Dr. Sampson, can you share a bit about your background? Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Michigan. I ended up going to my undergraduate there. I got my bachelor's one in zoology, one in engineering. And then I took a few years off, went off and explored the world before starting my master's program at Clemson, where I studied elephants in Sri Lanka and then moved to elephants in Myanmar before ending up in Calgary to study fish, and then came here to University of the Ozarks to work with the next generation of scientists.
That's super cool.
Thanks.
Why'd you pick elephants?
Because I was interning with the Smithsonian, and as I was wrapping up my internship there, they had some funding, and they were like, you're either going to go to Kenya or you're going to go to Sri Lanka. I was like, I don't care. I'll do either. And it was either going to be working with African elephants or Asian elephants. Mm-hmm. Ended up going to Sri Lanka to see how the elephants were using different parts of the habitat in national parks, and working for a few years there. And then when Myanmar opened back up after the dictatorship had the country closed for a while, we had originally had a project collaring elephants, tracking them with GPS. So I went there to restart the program. We ended up losing a lot of our elephants to poachers, which was really unfortunate. So we started working with the government in the country to start a program to mitigate some of those issues, and ended up being pretty successful. And after that, came back to the U.S.
Well, you did fish after that. What fish specifically?
Bull trout, so another endangered species.
Okay.
They do go all the way down to Nevada, but mostly up through the Rocky Mountains, up into northern Canada. So I got to go out to track those all through the Yukon, Northwest Territories, and Alberta, spending a lot of time out in the water, which was not a hardship whatsoever, a lot of time fishing, and got to work with a lot of the First Nation communities, and then ended up actually as part of that project working on microplastics and seeing how microplastics were threatening some of the endangered species and habitats up in remote locations.
That's interesting. And that all plays into, I've written here, human-wildlife conflict. Can you explain the study of human-wildlife conflict a little bit?
Absolutely. So as humans are kind of growing, our population has grown, and we're using more and more of the landscape for agriculture, for living, we're coming into close contact with animals that we might not always get along with. So started off working actually with alligators, human wildlife conflict down in Florida. Mm-hmm. So we ended up tracking alligators, seeing where they were on Sanibel Island, and figuring out ways where we could have humans and wildlife live together in as much of harmony as they could. And so that progressed. I worked with bears, I worked in Russia with tigers, and then ended up working with elephants in Sri Lanka and Myanmar. And then a little bit more with bears here in Arkansas as well.
All right, Mackenzie, now it's you. Can you tell us a little bit about your background? Like, where'd you grow up? Where are you from?
I grew up in Lamar. I went to Lamar High School. I'm a twin, so I always had that built-in competition. Yeah, I always won.
Like 100%
100%.
Okay.
100%. I graduated valedictorian. That was my one goal starting in kindergarten. I wanted to be the best.
From kindergarten?
From kindergarten.
Okay.
Yeah, so I didn't have a social life. I was in the books. And it was kind of hard sometimes because, like, it's high school. Like, everyone's like, you're supposed to have fun. I had fun. I thought it was fun.
You think studying is fun?
Yeah.
Okay. And then throughout your high school career, when did you decide that you were going to go to the Ozarks?
The very last of my senior year. So I was college planning, like, straight up 8th grade. And I thought I had to go, like, out of state. I always said on it, I was like, I got to go so far to get my education. Like, I want a good education. Can't get that in Arkansas. And, like, I was in Wisconsin, Maine, like, way out there. Yeah. And my car actually broke down at the 4-way stop in front of the high school. And I broke down. My car broke down, and then I broke down. And I was like, I can't go that far. So growing up here, like, my mom works here. So, like, I didn't ever consider going here because I grew up. I was like, always grew up on campus, running around like a little kid. And I was like, why would I go here? I've already been here. I never really saw it for the school that it is until I did go on a school trip here. And I was like, I love it. Like it's apart from Clarksville. Like it feels like its own little community.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized it's actually a really good school. So
And you're here to study biology, correct?
right.
At what point did you decide that you wanted to go the track of biology?
Ever since I was little, I was like, I love animals. Like that's what I want to do with my life. Like ever since I was little, like there was never a doubt. I was like, that's what I'm gonna do.
Is there a specific area of biology that you would like to focus on?
I want to work with like big cats, like mountain lions. Everyone's like, they're so scary. Like, why would you want to do that? You're so little. I'm like, I don't think they're scary. Like we have them around my house. I seen one actually
Really?
outside my bathroom window. I saw a little baby. And I was like, I want to do that. Like I had to like fight myself to not go outside.
To go outside to the mountain
Right.
lion?
And you can't see the mom. Like you could just see the baby. And I'm like, probably not a good idea. Like
yeah.
most people would be terrified.
Yeah.
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 I wasn't. I was like
It seems normal to be scared
practicing
of a mountain lion.
self-control. You know, they're not to be petted.
Okay. I mean, would you recommend going?
I recommend not petting the mountain lion.
Okay,
So
good.
solid instincts right there.
Good. I just wanted to clarify that that's okay, because you've been around elephants and tigers and fish. Fish could be dangerous too.
I mean, the big ones, they bite.
They do.
There's a lot of things that bite.
Yes.
Yeah. So you guys have been researching microplastics in aquatic ecosystems. Can you just explain a little bit about microplastics for people who might not know?
So microplastics, we talk about them as either being primary or secondary. So primary is going to be like those little beads that are in your face wash or in toothpaste or in manufacturing the little noodles or nodules. So microplastics are smaller than 5 millimeters, so about the size of a pencil eraser. Secondary microplastics are plastics that come off of larger things, so things that break down off of a bucket that you see that's tossed into a stream, or plastic bags, or even wash off of your clothes. So 1 million different microplastics can come off of your polyester clothing every time you do a load of laundry. And a lot also come off of tires. A lot of traffic wear leads to microplastics going into the environment, and not just staying where they are, but they can actually be transported through aquatic ecosystems like where we're working in, but also atmospheric transport. So in the air, in the atmosphere, being transported really far away up into the Arctic, 48,000 tons get moved up to the Arctic from the vehicle use that we have primarily down here in the lower, around the equator area.
Just to sound smart, I know that it's called marbling because I watched a racing movie that talked about the pieces of tire that come off called marbling. So I'm just curious about how is it picked up into the atmosphere?
Just wind currents.
And it just flies in the air?
Pass through air currents,
Okay.
atmospheric transport can take it up. So you can actually get really remote locations, mountaintops, alpine lakes that have the same amount of microplastic as we see in an urban environment.
Wow. And then you guys are focused specifically on aquatic ecosystems. Can you define aquatic ecosystems for people who might not understand those two words together? Not me, but other people.
I mean, aquatic ecosystems is anywhere you have water for long periods of time. You know, you have swamps, rivers, oceans. We're focusing more on the rivers and the lakes in the area.
Okay.
So
more on rivers and lakes. Is there a reason why you guys are more interested in the rivers and lakes as opposed to swamps or ponds or anything like that?
the rivers, you have the moving water. And so
Okay.
you have water moving from one location to another. And with the runoff off of the land, you have a higher chance of having more microplastics.
Interesting.
And so we can look at how microplastics are moving through a system, how they're moving from their origin site to other areas. So here on campus, we can use some of our equipment to tell us exactly what the composition of the plastic is, and that will help us trace it back to the origin, what that piece of plastic came off of.
Interesting.
And also a big part of our desire to study microplastics, especially through the river system here, is because Arkansas has one of the highest levels of food insecurity.
Okay.
So a lot of people rely on going out fishing or hunting for food. And if we're able to determine the amounts of microplastics in the aquatic ecosystem, in the food chain within the aquatic systems, we can help make recommendations about when people should go after different fish, if there's different times where microplastic levels are higher in the different fish that they're consuming.
And that's the research project that both of you are working on. Mm-hmm. And it's trying to find out when the best time to go fishing is?
We're way back at the beginning. We're just starting off on this. There's been very little microplastic work done in the state at all. And even most recently, until recently, a lot of the work has really focused on marine ecosystems. So freshwater ecosystems are a little bit behind. Terrestrial systems are even further behind. So we're starting here with one of the first projects in Arkansas, and we can use that to figure out right now. The project that Mackenzie is working on is just the amounts in the water itself, and then we'll move on to the food chain.
So what is it like essentially pioneering something? Like you're not following in the footsteps of anyone. You guys are creating this as you go. What is that like?
It's very new, very exciting. People ask a lot of questions, and you don't always have all of the answers right now. So it keeps it exciting. It keeps it, you stay engaged because you're excited to get to that end goal. Yeah. I mean, it's like kindergarten again, like gonna be that valedictorian, starting.
That's really cool.
Starting back over.
What's the process like for finding the answers to these questions right now?
Just a lot of research.
So we have been collecting, going out into different spots in the local community to collect their water samples. And then we have been looking through, we process the water samples themselves, run them through filters, and then they're looking for, on those filters, to count and characterize or categorize the different microplastics that are there. So are we finding fibers? Are we finding plastic beads? Are we finding fragments? And then we can take those, collect them, and again, look at the chemical composition, figuring out where they're coming from, and then take that information and compare what we're finding in the water to what we're finding in the fish or macroinvertebrates and eventually people themselves.
So at first I was thinking you guys were just taking like buckets of water and putting a microscope on it and being like, ooh, there are the plastics. But you said there's filters. So like what does it look like to be able to discover these microplastics in the water? Because I've been swimming and I have not seen microplastics.
But you've definitely drank them and definitely breathed them in.
That's not ominous at all. Thank you. So how do you see these things? How do you tell that they're there?
We have to use a microscope.
Okay.
Basically, I don't think most of them you can't see with the naked eye.
And this is after they're on the filter that you put the water through? Okay.
Yeah, we put the filter under the microscope. And then you take little tweezers and you have to like pluck them out to separate them.
That's super
We
interesting.
found green fibers so far.
Lots of green fibers. And so those primarily going to be things that come off of clothing. So every time you do your laundry and things come off, goes into the water system. And for the most part, we don't have filters on our wastewater treatment plants that are going to prevent those from going into our local waterways. And so they get washed into the streams. Yeah. They either reside there, they can go into the sediment. And one thing that's really cool is we can take core samples through sediments and see like layer by layer when microplastics were deposited over time. And
that's
look at
super
that
cool.
Ecosystem.
I mean, terrifying. But
Terrifying,
super cool.
but yes.
Have there been any other surprise findings that you guys have come across while researching microplastics?
Yeah, we're pretty much expecting to find them everywhere, and so far we're just getting started with going through the samples, but we did find them.
And then green fibers, is that a specific type of microplastic, or is that just the color of the microplastic is why it's called a green fiber?
Yeah, that's just the color and like the shape that it is.
What other types of shapes are there? Like, are there more names for microplastics?
So they're generally going to be categorized by their color and then their shape. So they're is it a fiber? Is it the bead? Is it a fragment? Is it a foam? And we aren't working really with foams, but the different shapes of them impact the different contaminants that can collect on them, and also the different ecosystems that they're in, marine versus freshwater, because it's not just the microplastic itself that's going into you, but it can be organic, like forever chemicals that are on the outside, heavy metals that cling to the microplastic. So when you breathe it in or you eat it, those go into you with the microplastic. And then they can release, they can contaminate you, they can concentrate over time.
Good. This is only getting better.
This is, it's pretty much, one of those kind of dark, despairing things.
Yeah.
So we try and make it light.
Good. Now, it's interesting. Are there other students that are working on the research project? So what is it like being a student working on such a clearly very important research project?
It's really cool. There's me and Lizzie.
Okay.
It's just us two right now, right?
Katie is also
we
working.
had other people help with getting water samples. It's primarily me and Lizzie. And I mean, it's just really cool.
What does the day-to-day look like? You go out into the field, so essentially you and Lizzie go and you get buckets and pick up water at specific
We're using
lakes?
jars so
Okay.
that they're sealed, so you don't have like contaminants coming in and out that isn't what's already in the water.
Okay.
We went and collected yesterday, so you just drive around town with jars and scoop up that yummy stuff.
Is there? You drink the water?
No,
Then how do you know it's yummy?
it was just. I think
Got it. I'm just trying to find out.
I do
So-
not recommend drinking the water.
Okay. Is there a method to the places that you choose to collect the water?
We're just we're looking for easily accessible because we don't want to like fall in and hurt ourselves.
Got you.
So we've gone to like boat ramps, swimming areas, fishing spots, anywhere that's just easily accessible. We go in groups of 2
Okay.
at least. So if one does fall in,
Somebody
you
can-
have help.
Yeah, you can get pulled out.
Right.
Are there any memorable moments that you have, like of someone falling in or anything?
So
fun
far,
that
no.
happened?
We've been very careful,
Okay.
and the weather's been nice to us. So nothing too scary
Nothing too scary so far.
so far.
Okay, because you could go to a more dangerous lake
Right.
or river
Right.
and possibly slip and fall in.
Right.
So it's a lot more dangerous than I thought.
We do have a 15-foot
It's like Mission
pole.
Impossible.
Yeah.
Okay. 15-foot pole and Mission Impossible. So are you using the pole to put someone else on to lower them in? Is that what you're?
No, so we'll put like a bucket or a jar at the end.
Okay.
And then we'll scoop it so we get like a shoreline sample, and then we get one from like further into the center
Okay.
of
Are
the
you-
water body.
Do you also try to get samples from deeper in, or is that something that's a next step?
That's going to be a next step. So that's a different piece of equipment that we'll need to get. And then also we actually have a grant in at the moment. So if I get that grant, then Mackenzie will hopefully be working on it next year as well. But we rent a boat and can go out into like the middle of Lake Dardanelle, sink that sampling equipment down and get samples from different levels in the water column.
Okay.
So that can tell us, again, where that water or where the microplastics are hanging out in the water column, and hopefully get something from the sediment at the bottom too.
What is it like working with your professor on a research project?
It's really cool. She's so smart. She's a great role model. So I'm happy to learn from her.
That's super awesome. And what is it like working with students on a research project?
It's fantastic. It's one of the reasons why I came here, is I really wanted to have that opportunity to, especially for really promising students like Mackenzie, to have the opportunity to expose them to research and get them hands-on opportunities to go out and do things that will both enrich their experience here, but then also help them next stage of their careers.
And that's what's great about Ozarks too, because you have that smaller student to teacher ratio. So you get to know your professors and they get to know you, and you get to have a relationship from that.
That's super cool. Do you think that the research projects are made stronger by working with students?
Definitely, it brings in
More perspective.
exactly more perspective, and it also helps me in particular like think through things because you have to explain it at a different level.
Yeah.
And that is great for helping to explain things to the public, and just having the help basically to do things. So they go out in pairs. I'm not usually one of the pair that goes out, but they get to go out and get all the water samples, and then we can bring it back here and process them.
That's super cool. So Dr. Sampson, can you tell us a little bit about the tutorial practicums and the benefits to students?
Absolutely. So this is one of the tutorial practicums that I do, microplastics. And then one of the other big ones that I've worked on here is the Human Wildlife Conflict Project. So that was started as a project. I still work with the Smithsonian, so that's who funded most of my master's and PhD field work. So all of the work that I did with elephants was worked through the Smithsonian. So my boss there, who is now the head of the Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute, he's had this idea that he wants to do human-wildlife conflict with collared animals. So just like we were doing with the elephants over in Asia, people collar bears here in the US. And so we wanted to see if sharing some of that tracking data actually helped people emphasize or increase their empathy for the bears and helped kind of create more of a connection, understanding how they used the environment. And so I've worked with a couple of different students on these projects. We went out to Yellowstone and talked with some of the National Park Service, the Fish and Wildlife Service, the Forest Service, different agencies who deal with human-wildlife conflict in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. The students got to go out there and go snowshoeing, talk with all of these people to learn about human-wildlife conflict out there. And then we came back here and we've developed a survey that we're going to talk to some of the local community about their feelings towards bear conservation. And then I'm also working with an education student who's writing a children's book to look at human-bear coexistence in our local community.
I'm noticing that Dr. Sampson is working with collaring a lot of animals, so you could probably just pitch to Dr. Sampson collaring mountain lions.
Definitely.
And then you get to pet the mountain lions.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
So, Mackenzie, as someone who grew up in Arkansas, how does it feel being someone who's working on a project that could directly impact the community you grew up in?
It's wild, honestly. I've grown up in the environment. Like it's basically part of the family at this point. Mm-hmm. So to be able to help something that's bigger than me, I mean, you can't really put a name on that. I mean, the gratitude you get from that and just the impact you have on those around you, it's amazing.
What is it like seeing that some of these waterways are places that you may have like hung out as a kid?
Right. So a lot of them, like we grew up like swimming in or fishing in, and then you're like, oh wow, I've been swimming in mass amounts of plastic and I drank all that. Like it's eye-opening for sure. Yeah, kind of takes away from the fun of the childhood. Kind of darkens that, but it's okay.
Yeah. I mean, this is a surprisingly heavy thing to talk about. So what do you guys hope for the research to do? Like what are you hoping to change with what you're researching?
Hopefully just get some laws, some just awareness, really. I mean, awareness and education is all that we can do at the start. I mean, as long as more people know, it's easier to help mitigate that in the future.
Policy recommendations are pretty much what we would hope would be the outcome from this. So the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, they are in charge of, setting limits so they can, as they're issuing permits to anglers, give recommendations. Maybe don't eat this fish during this time period. Focus on this other species. The method, how the fish eat, what part of the water column they eat in, if they are a fish that eats other fish versus plants, can all impact the amount of microplastics that they have, and also what part of the fish people eat. So most of it does stay in like the intestinal tract. Most people get rid of that, so that does lessen your amount. But some of the other work that I did with other students during my postdoc has shown that the plastics translocate, so they move from the gut tract into the fillet, into the skin, into other organs of the fish. So if you are eating those parts, you could be consuming more plastics than you're intending to.
Right. And you also have biomagnification and bioaccumulation.
What was the first one?
Biomagnification.
Biomagnification.
Yes.
And bioaccumulation. Got it.
So you start out with like just the microplastics in the water itself or the soil. You have like the fish or the land animals that'll eat just plants and drink the water, and it gets into their system, and then you have the bigger animals that'll eat them, and then you get up to us. So it's just this big old tower of microplastics moving their way through. So you just don't know how much you're actually consuming.
It seems to be a significant amount.
Yeah. At this point, people's brains are, I think, a study out of New Mexico, people's brains are 0.5% by weight plastic. And brains are 20% or 20 times more than other organs that they looked at. And when they compared brains from cadavers in 2016 to 2024, the amount of plastic has increased by about 50%. So as time continues on, we're just going to be more and more plastic, especially our brains.
That's something I think people in Hollywood would really enjoy, honestly. Okay, good. That joke landed. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. So what is next for this project? Or do you have other projects that you're planning on lining up after this?
So right now we're focusing on the water. We're going to mimic some of the other studies that I did up in the Yukon with the sediment, and then we are starting to collect fish. So we have some currently in the freezer, but local anglers can donate fish or fish parts, and we can sample the fish. We can also look at other parts of the food chain, so the macroinvertebrates, the insects that the fish eat. We can go through the food chain and then also move beyond that to land animals. So deer, very popular species to hunt, and because we're focusing on this food insecurity in Arkansas, that will probably be our next step, is look at the number of microplastics in deer meat, venison.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. Now, I think I've asked every question that I could think of, but is there anything that I may have missed that you guys would like to add about the research that you're working on?
Yeah. We're hoping it'll bring some awareness to the issue here, especially in Arkansas, where a lot of the work has not been done, but also kind of in the South in general. A lot of work has not been done with freshwater systems. Most of it has been focused in Asia and Europe, so bringing some of that to the U.S. and basically having the students be able to get a fairly big publication. If we can get this out, it could be pretty impactful overall. Yeah.
Hopefully we can start influencing other people to start their own research to get more research that we're missing.
That's super cool. Yeah, I've never talked to anyone on the forefront of a research project before.
Next generation, right there.
Both of you, you know?
Couldn't
Both
do
of
it
you.
without Dr. Sampson.
That's super cool. I heard an awe from over there in the audience. What's your favorite part of campus life?
I really like it in our classes when we get to go outside. I like just hands-on experiences, even if it's just a walk and talking about the seasonal changes in the environment and how that's impacting like the animals and the life around it. We talk a lot about just the urban life as it is and how it impacts the environment. Like everything we do, whether it be just driving to school or driving through town, it affects the environment. And just helping other people realize how much of an impact that makes. Like a lot of schools, we're University of the Ozarks, so we're like in the middle of the Ozarks. So we have that one-on-one experience with nature. A lot of colleges are like in big cities. They don't get that. So that's really cool that we get to, it's part of the classroom, is outside.
What's one book, movie, or TV show that you think everyone should experience in their life?
The science answer is Serengeti Rules. It is such a good one. So it talks about top-down and bottom-up trophic interactions. It has this great insight to some of the biggest ecology minds and some of the biggest foundational studies. I like Man on Fire. It's one of my favorite movies.
Denzel Washington.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can't go wrong with Denzel.
So Man on Fire is a movie and Serengeti Rules is also a movie? Or is it a book?
Serengeti Rules is more of a documentary. So my science professor answer is Serengeti Rules.
But
It's also a book.
It's also a book.
Okay.
But the book has all the medical side to it. So we read that in the community ecology class.
The documentary is more for my speed.
Yeah.
You said right too fast. You were giving a diplomatic answer. You immediately said right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Man on Fire. I love Man on Fire.
Such a good movie.
Denzel does great in that movie. Dr. Sampson, you have a free weekend. There's nothing you have to do, no research projects. What do you do with this entire 2 days of free time?
I am leaving my phone at home and going camping and fishing somewhere nobody can find me. Yes.
That's super cool. Mackenzie, what about you?
I'd probably curl up in bed with my dog and my cat and watch a nature documentary. David Attenborough.
Solid answer.
Yeah, you can join me.
Yeah. Separate rooms because
Yeah.
that's too much peopling.
Yeah. You guys
Yeah.
got to have your away from people time.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Get some apple juice. Just kick back.
Okay. Apple juice. Solid. Well, those are all the questions that I've got. It honestly, it was very cool talking to you too. The microplastics is very interesting. Terrifying, but very interesting. So thank you so much for joining me. This was
Thank
cool.
you for having us.
Thank you.